Pat, you're on.
Welcome, everybody. We are so glad to see this group of people. What we would ask you to do if you are on right now, please mute yourself because the only person who's going to talk at the beginning will be our speaker. And our presenter tonight is Maya Ahmadi. She is a graduate of Virginia Tech. Yay, Virginia. And she was very active as a student there. She worked to engage other college students in civic engagement across the campus, including starting two different groups, one called Hokies Vote Caucus and the other one Democracy Working Group. So she worked very hard during her college years. She is now a graduate. Recently, she was a intern on Capitol Hill. But just within late breaking news, within the last few days, she has a new job and she's going to be working in Richmond for Russet Perry, who is the Virginia senator in the Virginia legislature from Loudoun County. And so we're counting on all of you to go down to Richmond on February 7th during League Day and say hello to Maya. I don't want to say too much more about her because we want to let her have all the time. But we are so happy that League of Women Voters is having this wonderful speaker this evening and that we are trying out technology. Not to be said that we are old-fashioned ladies who can't do anything new. And we'll see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, we will just flow with it. But thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. And Maya, it's up to you.
Thank you so much, Pat, for that very lovely introduction. I would love to see you all in Richmond come February. And I've been involved with the League of Women Voters for almost 2 years now. I worked with the League of Women Voters in Montgomery County, which is a county that Virginia Tech is in, and we did high school voter registration there. And I was like, the league is awesome and full of awesome people. So being back up in Fairfax, decided to get involved again. And I also wanted to thank Judy for guiding me through this and helping put this all together. And I am very, very excited to be talking about civil discourse today with you all. Just to go into a little more background about my experience in civil discourse, I started a series through Hokies Vote Caucus called Deliberative Dialogues, where we brought people together from opposing or different perspectives and viewpoints to talk about really pressing issues that students were facing. We talked about mask mandates, we talked about policing, we talked about elections, and we talked about food insecurity. So I have experience not only moderating those discussions and guiding those discussions, but also training other moderators. And also I spent time in other campus departments and groups talking about civil discourse, why it's so important, and showing them the tools that are at their disposal to have productive conversations. So that's what I'm bringing here to you all today. So I'll just quickly go over our plan for tonight. I know there were some questions in the beginning, but this is our agenda today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is civil discourse. Then we'll do a little self-reflection. I'll talk about why civil discourse is important. And then we'll get into the skill building part of this workshop, where I'll talk about communication and asking the right questions. And then at the end, there will be a chance for you all to practice civil discourse with each other in the breakout rooms. And I'll talk a little more about what that'll look like as we get to that part of the night. But again, thank you all for taking the time out of your day, out of your evening, out of your very busy schedules to spend it with us and learn about civil discourse. So I will go ahead and get into it. What is civil discourse? Great question if you were thinking that. Oops. So I think when people think about civil discourse, they have this misconception about the word civil, meaning that they have to be really polite and it's all about these social customs that we should say please and thank you and all this stuff. And while being polite is certainly great, and I certainly endorse politeness, that's not necessarily what civil discourse is. So when we think about civil discourse, we should think about a truthful, productive approach to conversation. So it is something that you choose to take, that approach. And so that can sometimes pose problems when maybe one person is trying to engage in civil discourse and another person isn't. But hopefully today I'll be able to give you those skills and tools and resources so that you can navigate these conversations and use civil discourse and use these principles to have productive conversations, to learn more about the other person, and to just grow and learn as a person. So I just wanted to contextualize and loosely define what civil discourse is because they don't like super strict definitions. But that is what civil discourse is, very briefly. And I think as we go through everything, you'll get a better picture and a better idea of what I'm talking about. So I wanted to start off everything with self-reflection. So I want you all to take some time. We're going to take about a minute to answer the following questions. So think about it, about the last time you had a conversation with someone with differing opinions, and answer the following questions. Who did you talk to? What did you talk about? What was the tone of the conversation? How did the conversation end? Was there any type of resolution, agreement, or understanding achieved by the end of the conversation? And what do you wish went differently? So I'm going to give you all a minute to think through this, and then you'll have a minute to type out your response in the chat and send it to me in the chat, and then we will, I'll pick some things to review. So if you feel comfortable sharing, please do, but let's take the next minute and reflect on this, and then send your reflections in the chat.
Maya, if I could ask, do you want us to send it just to you or to the entire group?
You're free to send it to the entire group. I think that's the best way to do it.
If I could chime in, if you want it private, please send it to Catherine because she is manning our chat line.
So it's been about a minute. So I'll just ask you all now to start sending your reflections in the chat. And then we'll reconvene and I'll talk a little more about this.
So Maya, let me know and I can, when you're ready, and I can start sharing a few of the things that people have have shared in the chat.
Yeah, I have the chat pulled up, so I'll be able
Okay.
to look through those.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm. Thank you to those who shared your reflections in the chat. And there's a really wide range of experiences, um, which is really great, right? Because sometimes when we think about these difficult conversations, we immediately go to the contentious topics like politics, right? And while that's certainly happens and certainly true, um, this also happens in our personal relationships with our family members and coworkers, and the topic isn't always politics, right? So I'm seeing some common themes in the chat of not being able to agree on certain facts or issues, and then feeling, some people had an understanding of agree to disagree, but there was definitely, I see some feelings of it was really tense, it didn't end well, we yelled at each other, and now we're not talking about it anymore. So I think everyone can relate to that experience, and it seems like everyone here has can think of an instance where they disagreed with someone, maybe it didn't always end well, right? So that's a great transition into talking about why civil discourse is important. Um, Civil discourse is not about winning a debate. It's not about winning an argument. It's not about persuading the other person to come to your side. Civil discourse is about these 5 tenets that I have laid out here. So, a basic tenet of that is that engaging with people who are different from you is intrinsically valuable, because you can learn something from them and they can learn something from you. And at the end of the day, these are all kind of connected, so I might say some similar themes, but at the end of the day, you and I both have valuable experiences. You and I have both have valuable knowledge, and us engaging in those differences makes us stronger. It not only makes us understand the other person better, but it makes us understand ourselves better, because we are directly confronted with something that is opposite or different to what we believe in. And it requires you to take that step back and think about, okay, well, why do I believe in this? And why do I think this way? And that's always going to help you personally and professionally and with any relationship that you have. But to have good civil discourse, to have that productive conversation, you have to have respect for yourself and respect for that other person. Because when you don't, that's when we get into arguments. That's when we name call. That's when we drag people through the mud. And that's not what civil discourse is about. And that's part of what leads to those awful feelings. And especially when we think about these conversations that we're having with loved ones or family members or friends, we want to keep that respect and we don't want to alienate them, and we want to strengthen those relationships. So it's very important to remember that basis of respect. Then another important tenet of civil discourse is humility, recognizing that I don't know everything and you could teach me something and I can learn something from you or from somebody else. Because when you speak with humility and act with humility, people see that and they respect that, and it makes them feel heard and valued. And that's when they open up to you more. And that's when you can really get to the root reason of why do they believe this way? Why do they think this way? Why did they say this? These basic tenets help us achieve the goal of civil discourse, which is seeking understanding. Again, civil discourse is not a debate. It's not an argument. It's not trying to persuade someone to get to your side. We are seeking understanding of other people because, again, connecting it back to those other tenets, we don't know everything. And I respect you as a human being and the fact that you can teach me something that I don't know because of your unique experiences and your perspective. And then the last tenet is finding common ground. And people are skeptical about this one because if I am, for example, if I am pro-abortion and you're anti-abortion, how could we ever find common ground? How could we ever agree on anything? But you will be surprised that when you follow these tenets and use these skills that I'm hopefully able to teach you tonight, you will be able to find common ground with somebody that you on the surface think is extremely different, extremely opposite, extremely polar from you. And again, these are all connecting. It helps just broaden our perspectives. It helps us understand the other person. And it reminds us of our humility. And that way we can walk away from these conversations feeling like that was productive and I learned something and I didn't alienate this person. And we can continue to grow and have these conversations in this relationship. Because especially when we're thinking about really important topics, for example, food insecurity, it's probably not going to be solved over one conversation. So civil discourse is also kind of the foundation of building relationships and problem solving. So these are the tenets of civil discourse, and hopefully it gives you a better idea of what we're trying to achieve. So now we're going to move into the skill building portion of the workshop tonight. And we're going to talk about communication. Now, this is the hardest, I think one of the hardest skills to learn is how to effectively communicate with others. And it takes time and it takes practice. And that's why we're giving you all a chance to practice today in your breakout room so you can put this to use, hopefully. So I really love this visualization of conversation cube. While I was at Tech, I worked with Dr. Todd Shank, who did a lot of really amazing research on civility and civil discourse. And so this is a framework that he developed to help us contextualize the conversations that we're having. So conversations are complex, and a good conversation makes space for all these lenses. So if you look at the cube here, you can see the different lenses, right? We have values, ethics, and interests, personal experiences, relationships and affinities to others, emotions and intuition, and interpretation of information and evidence. So when we think about values, ethics, and interests, we think about people's moral compass, whether that's, a personal one that they subscribe for themselves or a religious one or otherwise. These certainly influence their beliefs. And I'm going to tie it back to that respect and humility tenet of we respect that everyone here is a human being, and everything and every human has a valuable perspective and experience. And I, as someone who is not you, don't have the right or ability to invalidate that, right? So we have to respect those ethics and those basic values that people come to the table with. Also, personal experiences. If you try and counter someone's personal experience with statistics, they're probably not going to be receptive to you, right? If I tell you, we'll use the example of food insecurity. If I tell you, oh, in college, it was so hard for me to put food on the table because I had to pay for books and tuition and I had to work and I barely had any money left to eat. And you tell me, well, only 5% or whatever percent of college students are actually food insecure. So I don't really know what you want us to do about that. Well, that kind of hurts the other person because they're talking to you about their lived experience. And by putting forth facts and data, you're not approaching that from the same lens that they are. You're countering it with something different that doesn't necessarily mesh. And again, bringing it back to that humility and respect. They have an experience that you don't, and you can learn from that experience. And that experience definitely impacts their beliefs. And then relationships and affinities to others. So I might not have a personal experience with food insecurity, but a close friend of mine or a sibling or a classmate or professor or somebody else might have had that experience. And because I have that relationship to them, I have a different attachment to this issue. Number 4, emotions and intuition. There's a very common idea, right? Or presumption that people might have that emotions have no place in a conversation that's supposed to be productive, that emotions are counterproductive and that they cloud your mind and they make you non-rational and all this stuff. That's really not the case here because emotions reveal something about yourself and about your beliefs. And I mean, I don't know about you all. My mom has insane intuition. I mean, she can tell whether a person is going to be a good friend or not. Um, when I was in high school, my mom would meet one of my friends one time and say, I don't know, Maya, like something's just off about this person. You're like, you're crazy, mom. Like, you don't know. You only met them once. Well, she's right. She turned out to be right. And I don't know if that's just mother's instinct, but that was her intuition telling her something. And while it couldn't necessarily be put into words, it still greatly impacted her beliefs and her interpretation of the experience and of the person.
Okay.
And then the 5th one is, I think somebody is off mute. So if you could just mute yourself. I don't know if you have the ability to mute other people. Let's see. Okay. Sorry. So interpretation of information and evidence. I put interpretation in bold because you and I might see the same statistic and extrapolate different information from it. Again, if we're going back to the example of food insecurity, I could say X number of students are food insecure. And your interpretation of that evidence could be, oh, well, there aren't great social support systems for young people putting themselves through college. And another person's interpretation might be, well, that person doesn't manage their money well because they don't have the ability to pay for X, Y, and Z. So while we're looking at the same facts and the same evidence, the interpretation could be extremely different. And also somebody who comes from a statistics background, I can tell you that a percentage is not always perfect reflection of reality. And all these other things go into creating that reality and creating those experiences and influencing people's beliefs. So if we want to have a good, productive conversation, we need to leave room for all these different lenses because they all help us achieve those goals again of, finding common ground, seeking understanding, having respect and humility, and recognizing that engaging in our differences makes us stronger, makes us better, and it opens up our viewpoint. And that's a positive thing. Even though the conversation might be scary, it's a positive thing to engage in. So if anyone has any questions about this, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you want any type of elaboration on anything, I'm happy to do so. But again, love this conversation cube thing. I always picture this cube in my head and try and remember people are coming from all these different angles. And again, can't respond to somebody opening up to you about their personal experience with a fact or a statistic or percentage, right? So that's conversation cubed. Setting ground rules. This is from the National Issues Forum, which does a lot of work on civil discourse. And I think this is so important. We did this a lot for deliberative dialogues because they were more like formal, structured conversations. But you might not always have a chance to explicitly set ground rules when you're talking to your dad or your kid or your neighbor or your coworker, right? But I think it's really good to have these in mind as rules for yourself because people will reciprocate the treatment that you give them. So setting ground rules, listen twice as much as you speak. If you are just talking at someone, they're going to stop listening after a certain point in time because you monopolizing the conversation might be a signal to them that you don't really want to hear what they have to say. You're just talking because you want to talk or just to hear yourself talk. Even though that might not actually be the case, it can come off that way. Number two, listen to understand and not to respond. If you are listening to respond, you are probably just picking up certain words or catchphrases or things like that that trigger a response in your head, and you're just waiting for them to stop talking so you can respond. But that's not the point of civil discourse. You want to understand them. And that goes into number three, which is asking clarifying and probing questions to understand what you don't know. If you are not sure what they're saying, ask. And we'll go more into asking the right questions later, but that's really, really, really important because we all have different ways of communicating, as we saw in this conversation cubed kind of example or visualization. So it's very, very important to ask those clarifying questions and also to make sure that, you know, what you heard is actually what they're trying to say. So that's also an important part of asking questions. And number four is attack issues and ideas, not people. Again, going back to humility and respect. Respect the person that you're talking to, treat them as a human being, treat them as you would want to be treated. And we're going to look specifically at the issues and, you know, dissect them and criticize them and change them and modify them and do whatever you want to the ideas, but we're not gonna, you know, directly link that to the person. Because hopefully through these conversations, you see that a person is not just their political viewpoint, they're a whole human being and they have all these different experiences and emotions and intuitions and relationships that affect their ideas and the issues that they care about.
Maya, before you move on to the nonverbal communication, we do have one question.
Sure.
And that is, how do you handle someone who is deliberately baiting you, maybe somebody who knows your trigger points?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think that it's also difficult situation to be in. And I'm sure everyone has experience like this because we all have friends and we all have families that know us very well and know which buttons to push. And it's about knowing yourself as well and knowing when you need to leave that conversation. Because if you feel like it's crossing into the realm of this is not going to be productive, this is not really looking like a conversation that I want to engage in, it's okay to say no and remove yourself from that situation. And also, if somebody is trying to bait you or trigger you or get you to say something, it would be great to ask a question. That's what I always feel is the best way to kind of diffuse the situation. Because if they're trying to get you to say something and respond a certain way, maybe a great way to diffuse the situation or de-escalate would to be asking a clarifying question to say, okay, well, what do you exactly mean by that? Because maybe you know this person is trying to push your buttons. Maybe they don't actually believe what they're saying, but they're just saying that to get some sort of reaction out of you. So approaching the conversation with being genuine and curious, and again, seeking that understanding, I think will help diffuse that situation. So it's a combination of knowing yourself, knowing when to step away, and then also potentially pushing them instead of them pushing on you and saying, what are you trying to like achieve by this? Or what do you mean when you said X? I don't understand. And try and gear the conversation differently. But at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't want to participate in civil discourse, you can't really change that. So it might just be stepping away. So I hope that answers your question. Um, okay, so moving on to the last ground rule, which is maybe one of the most important rules. So just remembering that 90% of communication is nonverbal. So being aware of your body language and maintaining an open and inviting atmosphere is extremely important. And I know we're on Zoom right now, so I'll take this moment and talk a little bit about trying to be more open on Zoom. So I think, I was a freshman when COVID hit, so I'm very familiar with going on Zoom and trying to seem like I'm paying attention when I'm actually not because my mind is somewhere else. But these conversations require you to be present and they require you to be mindful. And part of that is number one, having your camera on. I know right now we're in a workshop session, so it's fine if you're doing something else or having dinner or petting your cat or whatever it is. But when we're in these breakout rooms, I really ask that you turn on your camera so people can see you and they can see that you're paying attention because that's when these other points come into play, right? How are you sitting? Are you taking an engaged stance? For example, if you all can see me right now, if I was sitting like this and listening to you talk, would you think that I cared anything about anything you had to say? Probably not. If I was like this on my phone and texting someone, that's, it's not so different if someone was standing across from you and you just started texting when they were talking to you. Or I can see you if you're looking somewhere else or fidgeting with something over here or responding to emails. Might be able to hear your keyboard click. So I just wanted to take a moment and um talk about those things as well because there is such a thing as being present on Zoom as well. So um please turn on your cameras and just be mindful of your body language. Please don't answer emails when people are talking or texts. Just turn your phone away and focus completely on what we're trying to do. um Eye contact is important. I know it's hard over Zoom because camera and you're trying to look at yourself too. I know it's a little difficult to do that, but there are nonverbal cues, nodding your head, and making sure to check your tone. So sometimes people might come at you with a really aggressive tone, and that goes back to the question that somebody else asked before, like, what if someone's trying to push your buttons? Well, sometimes they'll use a really aggressive, they might say something that's okay. The words that make the sentence aren't bad, but the tone that they use is pretty inflammatory, or it's meant to make you angry or something like that. So it's really important to check your tone. And although it's hard, if somebody's talking to you in a tone that's unproductive, you can say, you know, your tone is really rubbing me the wrong way. And you kind of just have to step it up and respond in a nice tone. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the asking questions portion. But these are the ground rules. Does anyone have any questions about them, or maybe even think that there's a ground rule missing from here?
So far, there's nothing else in the chat at this point.
Okay, great.
Sorry,
Well,
can I ask a question?
of course.
I really struggle mentally with the check your tone one.
Mhm.
Where particularly women and also people of color have,
Mhm.
you know, are say like don't tone police, right? Or there's an assumption
Mhm.
that I can't engage with your ideas because of your tone. But is it the responsibility of the person who has been wronged or marginalized or systemically made vulnerable to
Mhm.
check their tone? And I wonder if you could just speak to that, because it does seem, yeah, when we make the effort to soften our voice and seem
Mhm.
pleasant, we can often get further. But is that really a responsibility all the time, or maybe just intentionally when we're doing civil
Sure.
discourse? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, yeah. So, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's definitely important to address. And again, going back to that question, if someone comes to you in an inflammatory way, it's 100% within your right to just step away and not engage with that person. Um, but it's the reality of the situation that if you continue to use an angry tone with someone, that the situation will escalate. And I'm not an expert on de-escalation, and I don't claim to be. I'm talking specifically about civil discourse. So this would be within a space, within a relationship, or with somebody that um, that you are kind of both not in agreement, are in a conversation together, and you don't want it to go south. You want to have something productive. And again, I mentioned in the beginning that the other individual might not have those same goals of seeking understanding, and it's not your responsibility to make them have those goals. You can't really do that. But if you want to be respectful, I mean, that's kind of the way to go with in terms of tone. But it's a combination of all those things, right? And I think what tends to happen is conversations might start out okay, and then we wobble and we get into a really dark rabbit hole, or argument. Sorry, my lamp just turned off. Um, and start to argue with somebody. Um, and that's when the argumentative tone is going to come out. So that's why I set those goals and intentions of this is why we're here. This is why we're having this conversation. And you can't always make that person have those same goals. But I think it's helpful to kind of compartmentalize and break these things down. So while it might not necessarily be 100% on you to fix the other person's tone, um, it's just more of like advice and things to keep in mind as you're going through these conversations. So for me, if I know there's a topic that I'm really sensitive about and that I'm particularly aware of how people talk about it and which words they use and their tone, and like, they hesitated before they said this, so what does that mean? So we all have those things that are really sensitive to us. And again, going back to the conversation cube thing, right? We're talking sometimes about intuition of maybe the person didn't, maybe I heard it this way because of my experiences and you heard it another way because of your experiences. So I can think of that even in my own family. My mom will ask a question and I'm like, oh, she just asked a question. My dad will be like, she's asking a question right now. So again, like we're all people, we all have, again, back to that respect and humility. But I definitely um um I think that it depends on who you're talking to. And you all know your relationships better than I do. So these are really just um, advice and things to keep in mind. I bet.
So my question is maybe piggybacking on what Jennifer just asked you. Um, Conversations do get heated even in
Mhm.
civil discourse. So can you respond? And I think where Jennifer was coming from is, some people will say things that might not be civil at that moment, but don't
Yeah.
understand. So when you're a woman or a minority, it's going to be taken potentially the wrong way, but you have to speak up. You can't continuously be calm and
Mhm.
collective because
Mhm.
there's no emotion. in it, and women's voices tend to pitch up higher or not.
Mhm.
Can you go into civil discourse with the goal, then get out of it in terms of an argument, and then come back
Mhm.
into civil discourse, but still holding your position?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely possible. And a strategy that I've taken in the past is when things get heated or argumentative or extremely emotional, if somebody's crying or somebody just yelled at another person, um, it is okay to take that time and reconvene for yourself and also reflect on that moment, if that makes sense. So I think that's a great way to transition back into civil discourse and also to help, create a learning experience for next time. Because when you look back and you kind of get a chance to understand what led to that moment, that helps you move forth in the civil discourse and hopefully helps maintain the relationship, if you have one, with the other person, and not just end with an extreme emotional experience and then we're never talking about this again, right? So having that ability to come back and take a chance and reflect is really important. And we'll do that after your conversations as well. We'll have some reflection for you all. But these are great questions that I could definitely spend a lot more time thinking about and talking about. But we do need to move on to the next portion of our workshop, which is asking the right questions. And this is always, for me, this is my favorite strategy for any conversation. And this really comes from my academic background, which is in philosophy, because that's all that it is asking the right questions. Socrates invented that. And many of my classmates hate Socrates because in high school, when we had Socratic seminars, people would have to talk and ask questions and all that stuff. But this is a really great way to kind of combat all the things that usually happen in these conversations that we don't want to happen, while also helping us achieve that understanding. So getting right into it, I'll go through different types of questions that you can ask. And remember that ground rule of asking, clarifying, and probing questions to help further understanding. This is going to help achieve that, maintain that ground rule. So the first type I have here is diagnostic questions. So these questions help you understand the background information people have on the subject. And remember, going back to the conversation cube, that could be their experiences, it could be their relationships, their emotions and intuition, their ethics and values, and in their interpretation of evidence. So we have explanatory questions, probing basic knowledge, extension questions, expanding the discussion, diagnostic questions, probes motives or causes, and priority questions seek to identify the most important issue. So the tip at the bottom is you may feel the urge to get defensive when somebody asks you these questions, and try and remember that they're asking these questions to seek understanding. So a simple "why do you feel that way" might come off poorly, right? But if we kind of give people that, remind ourselves of that humility and respect for other people, and recognize that we're all here for the same reason, then hopefully that helps you feel less defensive and be able to answer these questions openly and honestly. Because if those questions aren't answered openly and honestly, then we're not seeking understanding and we're not finding that common ground. So that's a first type of questions. We're talking finding basic knowledge. Maybe you don't know what someone's personal experiences are, for example, with food insecurity. um, and the diagnostic questions can help when you want to understand why somebody said or did something. And I like priority questions as well, because we can really easily get into a bunch of different rabbit holes when we talk about issues. So asking the question of, what do you feel is the most important thing of all the things we just talked about? That's going to reveal something about the person to you. Engaging questions. This helps you figure out people's values and how they apply them in different situations. So this isn't meant to trap people, right? Because if you say, oh, you applied this value in this situation, but did it differently in this situation, it might come off to the person as like you're trying to trap them or trick them or like show them that they're wrong and laugh at them. But again, going back to the respect and humility. If you're open and honest and genuine about these, then hopefully people don't feel that way. And having the hypothetical and open-ended questions can help you see how people apply their beliefs in different situations. And then the tip, again, answer these questions honestly and openly. If you're fearful about being honest about your opinions and hide them, again, it's going to be hard to find common ground and understanding. Expansive questions. Some of the titles of these are pretty self-explanatory, but expanding the discussion beyond the individual. So broader implications and connecting the issue to other ideas. And I think that's really important when we're exploring the intersectionality of issues and how food insecurity can be one issue, but there's different branches and people are affected by it differently. And it attaches to, our ideas of our basic rights and the social support systems we've created and all these different things that I'm sure you all will discuss. So we have challenge questions, so examining assumptions, conclusions, and interpretations, relational questions, looking for themes or motifs or basic values applied across the board, cause and effect questions. What do you think caused that? And then analytical questions, which are similar to the hypotheticals, or have a similar goal to the hypotheticals, right? To see how you can apply a concept or principle in a new or different situation. And the other tip, remember to check your tone. Even if someone asks a question rudely, responding rudely will escalate the situation. Reflection questions. So these are appropriate to ask at any point in the conversation. When Emma brought up, having an emotional break point and wanting to come back to the conversation and continue to try and engage in civil discourse, I think reflection questions are a great way to evaluate what just happened, take a step back, and then to hopefully be able to move forward. So process questions, how do you think the conversation went? At what point did you feel XYZ? Summary questions, trying to think about themes or lessons that emerged. This is really helpful when also trying to find common ground. Evaluative questions, gauging emotions, anxiety levels, what's going well or not. This can be also preventative for emotional escalations, right? And then action questions, calling for a conclusion or action. And that might be a moment where you say, hey, look, I think this conversation is not going well. And I think we need to take a break, or we should approach this at another time. Or maybe it's an action. Oh, we agree on this. We should get together and do XYZ. So I think reflection questions are really, really important, and we don't always remember to ask them. Another tip, it's important to check in with the other person to understand what they're saying. Sometimes there's innocent miscommunication, so it's important to explicitly repeat back to the person what you understood from the conversation. Again, going back to conversation cubed, we approach things from a lot of different lenses, and they all intersect to be our beliefs and what we say to other people. And so when you ask again those clarifying questions of, okay, so what I heard you say was XYZ. Was that right? Did I miss anything? Was there something else that you wanted to add? Those questions can really make people feel heard. And it can also prevent any type of miscommunication that might be the foundation for an escalation in the conversation. So those were the types of questions. I kind of had to rush through them just so we could have enough time for the breakout rooms. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Yeah, it's Maya, I just have a time check because it is
Mhm.
56.
Okay. Okay, so if there wasn't anything y'all wanted to chat about, then we can just move on to the breakout portion and or the practicing civil discourse breakout rooms will be a little bit later. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through talking about food insecurity, because a really important part of what we're doing tonight is we're going to set this kind of base level for you all to take, jump off of. So quickly, I'll define food insecurity. Many different people have different ideas of what food insecurity is. Your food bank might not be using the same definition as the USDA, which is the definition that I have here. But just so we're all on the same page of what I mean when I say food insecurity, it's a condition of not having access to sufficient food or food of an adequate quality to meet one's basic needs. It means that people don't have access to nutritional, affordable, physically accessible, and culturally appropriate food. So if an individual does not have access to food that meets all four of the criteria, they're considered food insecure, according to the US Department of Agriculture. What causes food insecurity? One, racism. Policies have created a racial wealth gap, leaving households of color at higher risk of food insecurity. Low wages, low income, and wealth are big factors in determining whether or not somebody is food insecure. And high cost of housing causes low income, driving high rates of food insecurity. And this is from the Congressional Hunger Center, which is using the same definition as the USDA for food insecurity. So food insecurity data from Fairfax County. So Fairfax County residents, 5.8% of Fairfax County residents are food insecure as of 2021, as estimated by Feeding America, which uses the same definition as USDA. I also put in here the Capital Area Food Bank, estimated 24% in 2023. They do not use the same criteria as the USDA, so I just wanted to make that clear. But the Capital Area Food Bank is one of the largest food banks in our area, and they serve a lot of people in the DMV area. So I also wanted to include that. So again, like going back to the conversation cube, statistics don't always reveal the whole story. Demographic breakdown. Again, this is from Feeding America. So children under 18, 2.2% food insecurity. You can see Black, Latino, and white, non-Hispanic. So I put a little asterisk. And since we're kind of running behind on time, I won't open this up to you all. I'll just say, I always ask the question, what's missing? Who is missing from this data? What demographics are missing? We're missing Native Americans, we're missing the elderly, we're missing college students, and other racial and ethnic groups. And So these statistics inform a lot about how we perceive and think about the issue, right? So it's important that that data is representative as well. So I just wanted to point that out. So this is specifically from the Fairfax County Community Health Needs Assessment and the youth survey data, which students fill out in school. So it's self-reported data. So 3.5% of 8th, 10th, and 12th grade white students reported hunger due to lack of food in the home. And again, that was their definition, hunger due to lack of food in the home, which is not necessarily the USDA definition. 13.8 of Hispanic students reported hunger due to lack of food in the home, and the lowest availability of affordable quality food are reported by respondents ages 55 to 59 and by Hispanic respondents. And across the board, there's been a decline of consumption of fruits and vegetables since 2014. Food assistance data in Fairfax County. So how much are people using these resources? So 60,000 children qualified for free and reduced meals in 2022. There were 13,000 participants in WIC, Women, Infants, and Children program, and 1,000 served on Meals on Wheels, and 43,000 SNAP recipients in Fairfax County. And that's of 2022. Potential solutions. Potential, big emphasis on potential. There's so much more out there, and that's hopefully what you all will discuss. Supporting local food banks. I don't know why it cut off at the bottom, but this solution calls for an investment into local resources that serve communities in need. So Virginia has a food crop donation tax credit. That's from the state, that you receive a tax credit of 30% of the fair market value of your donated crop of your Virginia state taxes, providing incentives for farmers to donate produce to food banks who are able to provide fresh produce for those in needs. And then Virtual Stuff the Bus supports local food banks through monetary donations. Solution 2, expand local, state, and federal food assistance programs. So this solution calls upon the government to provide assistance to those in need. So in Fairfax County, we have the Food Access and Literacy Work Group, which aims to expand SNAP and WIC acceptance at retail stores, particularly at international markets in communities of need. And then we have Virginia Fresh Match, that doubles the value of SNAP. So when customers spend $20 with an EBD card, Virginia Fresh Match provides another $20 to spend on fresh fruits and vegetables. And then, of course, we all know the free and reduced meals in Fairfax County Public Schools that provide students with food on a need basis. So I know I went through that quickly. So if you all have questions or comments, please put them in the chat. So in the breakout, we're going to be discussing food insecurity, answering the question, how do we solve this problem? And I'll ask you all to consider both those solutions. So take the time and actually consider each of them individually and share openly and honestly, and remember that we're starting with respect and humility with the goal of understanding others' perspectives.
Can I?
Yes.
Before you go into the text, regarding the information you just shared, most of it can be found right in our voter.
Yes.
Which I think a lot of people have already received. And then also on the website, the resources that you use that really dive deeply into the subject can just with a click get those resources. It's the same article, right, but the resources are there. So I
also wanted to mention that civil discourse does not require you to be an expert on the subject that you're talking about. You don't have to be an expert in SNAP or WIC or food banks or food insecurity to have an open, honest, productive conversation about it. Nor do you have to be about any other topic as well. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And your first task in the groups is sharing your personal stake, and your discussion moderators will kind of take you through this as well. So answering the questions, why are you here? What, if any, connection do you have to this issue? And remember to be respectful of others' times, try not to monopolize the conversation. So at this point, we'll open up the breakout rooms, and your moderators will be not guiding the discussion, but just being there as a resource and sort of an umpire to make sure that we're all following the ground rules and we're staying on track, and answering any questions you might have. So I think, Emma, bet if we're ready to open the
Yes.
breakout rooms, we
Okay.
can go ahead and do so. And
So-
it'll be floating around.
Yeah, just a change of plan. We originally had 6 breakout rooms pre-scheduled, but because people have dropped off, we're only going to have 4 that are going to be randomly assigned. So after that occurs, we'll assign the moderators to the different rooms if we got too many moderators in one. Okay.
And Maya, how long should we spend in the breakout rooms?
Yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. We're looking at like between 30 and 45 minutes. But this is not high pressure, high stakes situation. I genuinely want you all to reflect about what I talked about and put those into action. And the first task is going to be sharing your personal stake. Because I think when we start off with that openness, that kind of sets precedent for the rest of the conversation. So we're going to spend like 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll come back together into the big group, and we're going to have a poll for you all, a reflection poll, as well as a survey evaluating the event. And please answer openly and honestly, but we can go ahead and open those breakout rooms.
Okay. So they're open now. You should have an invite to join your breakout room. Everybody should be in a breakout room, and I'm going to
Awesome.
stop the recording as per.
Okay.
So I'm going to pause it.
Record this last portion of the night. Yeah, so it sounds like you all had some great conversations, and hopefully you all got to see, especially this, I love the conversation cubed idea. So hopefully you were able to kind of keep that in mind as you were listening to other people, and hopefully been able to pinpoint like, oh, they're bringing in this perspective and then talking through this lens, and then they, and so hopefully it just helped you compartmentalize things and visualize things, and was productive. I know there was a concern of, we all already think the same way and probably agree on this. So maybe it's not as like practical as if it was somebody who thought so differently from me. But I will point out that just as much as, and I told this to one group, but the same way that civil discourse, we're trying to find common ground, you can also use these skills to figure out where you disagree. So I think it's important, even if you all can agree on the surface about something, you might find disagreements, just as even if you disagree about something on the surface, you might find something you can agree on. So hopefully you felt like that was accomplished, and you all got a chance to put to test the skills that you use. So Catherine is going to activate our reflection poll, and it's a short answer, and it's all anonymous, but you can put what your group agreed on, what your group disagreed on, and perhaps what perspectives were missing from your conversation. And so we'll give you like a minute or so, maybe 2 minutes, since you have to type everything out, 2 minutes to answer those questions. And in the meantime, if you run into any issues, you can just speak up or put them in the chat.
So Maya, somebody's taken over my my
Can you see the poll now?
I see the poll.
Okay, so activate the one that says today's date on it and this session. It's polls.
Yes. And
Okay.
I launched it and now
Okay.
it's
Yes.
on my screen and I have the end poll
Oh,
option.
okay. I don't see
I
it on my
got it.
screen. Okay,
I've
cool.
got it. I'm typing.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank
So
you
there
all so
should be
much.
3 questions.
Mhm.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't see it on my side.
So what I don't see are the answers that people are putting in.
Okay, so Maya, can I ask you to go to more and see if you could click on polls and quizzes?
But I can see that people are filling it out
Okay.
because
So when
the-
you end it, Catherine, when you hit end, once you get about 25, there's 25 participants online, so I'm not answering the question, so maybe 20, you could close it out and then say show.
okay.
Okay.
And I believe the answers will be anonymous, right? So
Yes, they're all anonymous.
So you all don't feel the need to, give a very
Academic response.
response. Yeah, you need to write your thesis paper right now. But just to, again, like those reflections are really important, and hopefully the conversation was productive. So just we want to see a quick snapshot of what all y'all talked about. And then we will have, after this poll, we will have a survey. So you all can evaluate the event. Please, please, please fill that out. And be as brutal as you would like. We want to learn more about how this event worked for you, what you liked and didn't like, as well as any comments you have on the content. So yeah, that's coming as well after we talk about this.
all right. I think people are mostly done now entering their answers. So I will
Close.
yeah, I'll go ahead and close it. If anybody has something they really need to add, we can add it in the chat or you can speak up.
And then after you close, it should say, do you want to show?
It said
Display.
share
Yeah.
and now it says stop sharing,
Okay.
but I can't see the answers.
I can't either. So Maya, can you stop showing your screen? And now hit share, Catherine.
No, I only have stop sharing as an option at this point.
Uh-oh.
Can anyone see the answers?
Yeah.
I
I can only see my end.
I did, but I closed it.
Just the percentage of people who
Right.
answered. No
Right,
answers.
That's
Yeah,
all
we
I
can't
see.
see answers.
too.
We just see percentages of who answer, how many people answered.
Okay, let me go to Zoom settings. Meetings.
I think I'm recorded as Betty, but my name is Shirley.
How'd you do that?
Whatever came on my screen.
Somebody's I don't know how to get back my.
Why don't you make me no longer be a co-host?
Let's try that.
I think Arena had a good idea in the chat of each one person from each group giving a summary. I do want to be respectful of our time. So if we do this, it would have to be like a 1 sentence summary, which I'm not sure does everything justice. So I think we should be able to see these, oh, where did you all go? The poll questions after. Okay.
Catherine, I'm gonna make you a host and I've taken it away from Maya. See if you could see anything.
I can still see the questions and the percentage of people who answered, which is all I've been able to see ever.
Okay, so can you make me the host now?
Maybe.
Yeah,
Stephanie-
because you are the host.
Stephanie Abbott said she could see them.
She could see the
Percentages,
percentage of people that answered.
Yeah,
Right.
I saw everything. I saw percentages, and I saw my answer and whether
Yeah.
people, the percent of people who agreed. But I've closed it now because that's the only way I could unmute. So I don't know where
You
it
can
is.
go up to more, and if you go up to more,
Yeah.
I thought there was a way to open the chat, the poll. But
Yeah,
it's
that's
not there now.
my more is gone. So Catherine, I'm going to leave and come back in.
Okay.
Okay. You are
I
the
have a
host.
bet.
Yes.
Would you be able to send the link for the survey so while we're trying to figure this
Sure.
out, people can fill it out?
Okay. Oh, I'm so scared to leave. Oh, okay.
We're using up the time where we should be hearing summaries.
Yes. All right. Well, if maybe the group leader from each group would like to go and just give a very short summary.
Yeah.
Now I'm out. Oh, shoot.
Judy, you're there?
No, I just pressed a button and I'm gone.
Okay.
Who's our leader
Sarah?
from group one?
Well, I see Sarah has her hand up, so let's start
Sarah,
there.
was the leader.
Okay, I was the leader for group two, and let me see if I remember the questions. The first one was there anything we agreed on, I believe? And that one was, there was a general consensus that universal basic income might help solve the food insecurity issues, or at least help address them. The second question was, did we disagree on things? And basically, no. There wasn't very much that we disagreed on. And the third question, somebody prompted me.
Was what perspectives were missing from the conversation?
Oh, people who thought that there should be no governmental assistance whatsoever.
Mm.
We didn't have anyone who thought that the government did not have a role to play.
Thank you so much for sharing. Group, let's do group one.
Barbara,
Who's the
why
leader?
don't you go ahead and talk for our group?
You're giving me our group? Okay.
Yep.
I think we generally did not approach the issue of universal income and poverty. We went straight to the issues of food insecurity and the government programs versus non-government programs. My simple way of putting it would be, say, we all agreed that people should be fed. And we did have some discussion around the issue of very specific stuff around things like farmer support programs that described that we were unfamiliar with, tax incentive. And does it work when you try and both help the farmers and help the people who are food insecure? What are the downsides and upsides to those political solutions that try and make both sides win? And that a fair summary?
Very fair. Thank you.
Oh, and we had some factual stuff about why obesity is related to food insecurity that
Allison, do you want to speak for our group?
Okay, it's hard to take notes and lead the discussion at the same time. But there was very little disagreement, I would say, virtually no disagreement in our group. Some people were more familiar with food banks and government programs than others. And some of the things that came up were that what are the factors that may make some people reluctant to even access what food resources are available. Some people have difficulty swallowing their pride and saying, yes, I need some financial assistance, I need some assistance to get my family fed. Others may be that the food is not culturally appropriate or even, particularly safe for children. School kids, they have access, they can access food, but there have been issues that by the time they reach middle school, they don't want to be seen as taking any kind of, government program or whatever, and admitting that their family doesn't have food resources, and that's an issue. So that the extent to which food services can be universal to the kids, and they don't have to stand out that they need, some kind of card or assistance, that would be better. That there should be education as well on nutrition and what's healthy foods. And that should be whether you're going to a food bank or whatever other sources. It was noted that an organization like Capital Area Food Bank does try to do that, to make colorful.
Sorry, Allison, I don't want to interrupt you because all the points are great. I do want to give time. It's 9 o'clock, so I want to quickly give the last group a chance to talk about what their group talked about.
About group one, and we had very similar things, that there is a need for food banks, but there are many issues with them, one of which is transportation, one of which is the meals may not be necessarily nutritious, and that people might prefer more of a smorgasbord that's like a grocery store. So those issues, and basically we all agreed on the need for that. We talked a little bit about some of the federal programs. We talked about the farmers and that program and expanding that to people growing their own vegetables. And I think that our group had a lot of experience with food banks, but we didn't have too much experience and understanding of what the federal program was and how it worked. Although we felt, we felt that having things through the schools was a good way, because the community, the school is a community, and families can get to a school.
Awesome.
Maya, I'm sorry, I know it's 9 o'clock, but I do see the results. If people are willing to stay a little longer, I could pull them up for you.
And then Emma Bet has also shared the link to the after action survey in the chat.
Yeah, so I think what we should do, Emma Bet, if you can just send me everybody's responses, I think we got a great idea of, all the groups and what was talked about there. And I think you can see, even though, everyone said there wasn't much disagreement among their groups, we can see that even though we were talking about the same thing, every group had, a different focus area, right? So depending on people's personal experiences or knowledge or emotions, intuitions, relationships, that kind of like took the conversation to a different space. So hopefully that you saw that principle in action a little bit. So I just wanted to direct everybody to the survey that Emma Bet put in the chat. Please fill that out. Just any feedback that you have for me about the presentation and about, the process of this event would be super helpful. Again, like we said at the beginning, this is, first time we're doing something like this, so would appreciate any feedback that you have. And if you guys have any other questions or last minute comments, I'm happy to hear them. But I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's 9 o'clock. I have to get up early tomorrow. So
Well, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. We actually appreciate everybody that's been here tonight. It's a way to spend 2 hours on a Wednesday evening. There's nothing good on TV anyway, people. So let's might as well do this. So we also appreciate your willingness to step up and try something new. We've never done this before with breakout rooms and surveys and polls. My goodness. We're going to be so technologically astute pretty soon that we won't even recognize ourselves. So we appreciate all of the people who attended this evening, but we particularly want to say a big thank you to Maya and for her presentation and her skills. And we look forward to seeing her in February in Richmond, February 7th. We also want to thank Emma Bett, because she is the person that knows the technology, and she's done a lot of work on this. Thank you to Julie and Judy, who had this idea and arranged all of this for us. We appreciate that. And we also are thankful for our facilitators. I have their names written down: Julie, Judy, Sarah, Allison, Judy Smith, Mary, and Barbara Boardman. So we are we have a lot of people to thank, and we are happy that all of you came and that the hardcore people stayed till the very end.
yeah, this is the real group of warriors right here.
And we know that we do agree, and but honestly, when we talk about things, there may be, when we get down to the nitty gritty, there might be parts that we disagree. And I found this helpful. Maybe next time I talk to my sister-in-law, things will go better. I'm not sure.
There's a learning curve. It takes a lot of practice and knowledge. So hopefully this is a good first step.
Thank goodness Thanksgiving only comes once a year.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good night, and we hope to see you soon. Okay, good night. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.